back to the Miraculous Mamas podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Joy, and we believe in empowering women through storytelling and education. And I'm super excited about this week's episode. I know I say this every single week, but I truly am. We have Jen Fulwiler on, and she's a comedian and a mom. And I watched one of her comedy clips, and she's just like, she's hilarious and so down to earth. And she just has a really cool story of how she got to where she is. She's about ready to go on her stand-up tour. So if she's coming to an area near you, definitely check her out. If you missed last week's episode, definitely go back and check it out. Dr. Mona Delahook was on, and she's a childhood psychologist. We talked all about toddler tantrums, how to deal with them, what's going on in their minds. And as I said in the podcast, I'm in that phase with Jovi. So it was really refreshing to hear from her and just get some solid tips on what I could be doing as a parent, how I can hold space, but also set boundaries and everything like that. Also, today, if you're listening right when the podcast comes out, March 21st is World Down Syndrome Day. So if you're listening, wear mismatched socks to help celebrate World Down Syndrome Day. I know that some people had reached out to me and let me know. So make sure you take a picture of your socks, tag it on your social media, hashtag, just to show your support. That would be amazing. Yeah, and I am, let's see, Tula's going to be 3 weeks this week. Postpartum's going pretty well so far. Definitely had some emotional days. Definitely tired, but I think once you've learned that you can do it with your first, then the second tired's like a little bit different. The middle of the night's definitely frustrating sometimes when you're like, oh my gosh, I just need to go to sleep. But as I mentioned last week, I have family here. I have a lot of support right now. I am nervous for when that goes away. Plus, Vito's been able to do a little work from home some mornings, but pretty soon he will not. And I feel like that's when it's going to be really, really hard in the mornings when they're both hungry. They're both, waking up. And same with bedtime if Vito's not home. Just kind of balancing both the kids and figuring that out. So we will be sharing our birth story soon. I just got a few days ago back my birth photos. We hired a birth photographer, which I highly recommend. And they've just brought up a lot of feels for me. And I just realized that I wasn't quite ready to share my birth story yet. Just looking at the photos, and she did some videos, and we started watching one of the videos, and I was like, I can't hear this right now. We had to mute it. And then I was like, okay, I've watched enough for right now. So I just need to still process through it a little bit, sit with it, and enjoy this beginning time with our family. And then we'll definitely be hopping on to share that with you. All right. Like I said, I'm super excited about this week's episode. If you're listening, share the podcast, leave us a review. That's the best thing that you could do for us and help get the podcast out there. All right, we're going to dive into the interview. All right, everyone, I have Jen Fulwiler here, and I'm excited to talk to her. I actually just watched one of your stand-up clips. I watched it a couple weeks ago with my husband, and he's like, she's pretty funny. And then I told him that you had 6 kids, and he's like, man, she is living the dream. Because one thing on my list to make me uncomfortable, I'm like, I want to do a stand-up sometime. Just because I feel like it would push myself, but not actually become a comedian, just a random stand-up night. Right. But I'm so excited that Jen's here with us because she is a best-selling author. Like I said, a mom of 6. She's a stand-up comedian, and she's been through a lot. She jump-started her career doing a comedy tour that started March 2020, and we all know how March 2020 went. So I'm so excited for her to share her story and everything that has brought her to where she is right now. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
I am so excited to be here. I love what you're doing, so it's really an honor to be here.
Yeah, I love what you're doing. I feel like for me, humor is one of the best things. If somebody tells me oh, Liz is funny, I'm like, that is the best compliment I've ever received in my entire life. If you tell me I'm hilarious, I'm like, you're my best friend.
Well, and honestly, that's one of the things that inspired me to get into comedy is just in my world, knowing a lot of moms who they have kids, or, you know, they're in the baby phase, or they have teens. I mean, life as a parent is so hard. And when I would go watch stand-up comedy specials, most of them were by these young guys talking about being single guys. And so I was on the radio at the time on Sirius XM, and I started using humor more in my show. And I just heard from so many women who said, you know, thank God someone's making me laugh, but also speaking to my life experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I was laughing too because so much of your content was relatable. I was saying right before the podcast, like, well, you had 6 kids in 8 years, and I have 2 cousins right now that have just done that. And I don't think they're planning on stopping.
Really? Oh, not a lot of people do that. Okay, wow.
I know. And my husband, he's like, he wants 5 kids. He's like, let's do like 4 and 4, 5 and 5, like whatever. And I'm like, babe, like, I don't know how I'm going to feel. I don't know how I'm going to like bounce back. But also my cousins who do that also homeschool. So
yes. And we did that for many years.
Yeah. So your jokes and stuff were relatable. My sister has 4 kids and she homeschools. So I'm like the jokes were like super relatable to my life experience with my family. Yeah. So that's awesome. Tell me about the
I'm
6
amazed
and 8.
That you know people who, you know, not a lot of people have big families these days. So we must be in kind of the same circles.
Yeah. My family definitely does. But tell me, how was it having 6 kids in 8 years?
Well, one thing to start with is that I was never someone who thought that I would be good with babies. I mean, when I was in college, I didn't think I would have kids. I didn't dream about having kids or getting married. That wasn't on my goals list. And I wasn't one of those kids as a teen who babysat. I never asked to hold people's babies. I didn't have a big interest in babies, to be honest. And so, and I like to share that part of my story because I hear from a lot of young women who are thinking about what their life will be like. And they think if they're not naturally domestic, if doing glitter crafts and cooking organic souffles doesn't sound good to them or doesn't sound like something that they would excel at, they think, well, I guess I can't have kids then, because you have to have a Betty Crocker type, you know, Mary Poppins type personality in order to be a good mom. And that's part of what I like to do in my comedy. And I'm always joking around on Instagram and just showing women that there are other ways to not only be a mom, but be a happy mom and thrive in motherhood. So so I had 6 babies in 8 years. I will not lie. It was hard during those years. I mean, it was struggle. There were so many times that I was really struggling, but 2 comments on that. One is that it actually is easier as the kids get older because my kids play together and you know, especially when as soon as your oldest turns like 5, 6, 7, then you've got a halfway sane person in the house who can help you out. And then having kids close in age, one of the things that I think is easier about my life is that my kids never expected me to be their entertainment during the summers or whatever. They'd play with each other. We had a whole herd of kids in the house. And so that I started to see the benefits of like, wow, it's really nice having these kids close together. They hang out with each other and they play. And the second thing is my first book, I actually wrote in the middle of those years. And everybody, except for my husband and a good friend, everyone thought I was crazy they would say, why would you do extra work during that time? And I ended up hearing about this idea of having a blue flame. And it's a friend of mine kind of coined that term. And the idea behind that is your blue flame is something that you put out in the world that it gives you energy when you do it. It is not work for you. So like a friend of mine loves cooking. For me, cooking is toil. It is work. I hate it. I'm exhausted after I'm done cooking something. But for my friend, it's a joy. She loves being in her kitchen. She loves it when she runs out of an ingredient because it gives her a chance to improvise. So that's a blue flame. And discovering that my blue flame was writing and unapologetically making space for that blue flame in my life, that actually not only did it not subtract from my family, but it helped me show up better every day as a mom and as a wife and just do what I needed to do because that blue flame work was giving me energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like that's hard to sometimes find in motherhood because your identity might get a little lost. And that's something that I've been like thinking about a lot lately is I really used to enjoy it. I had a blog and I loved that, and just really used to enjoy outdoor things, but I've moved locations where there's not as many options. And I'm like, what fuels me? And that's like a conversation that I've had with my husband so much is like, I'm like, I feel like I've lost my inspiration. I used to be like so inspired by this thing and that thing. And now I'm like, I have no idea what it is.
And that's a really tough place to be in. I think that's a tough place to be in when I guess it was sort of a gift that I knew that it was writing. Mm-hmm. And that's my thing. I will say, I think a lot of people are in that place right now because the world has been in such upheaval for the past 2 or 3 years that mm-hmm. I think a lot of us are really starting to feel it now. And I've heard from a lot of people who are saying that they're like, they really feel just a little bit kind of lost or aimless, or like, you know, they just don't know what their path is. But you'll find it. You will definitely find it.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to share with you guys something that has saved me a lot of money. And just to start off, I mean, how many CEOs are out there that have gotten rich from a free trial that you forgot to cancel? And that ends now with Truebill. Or is your ex like still using your Netflix account? I remember I actually logged in at an Airbnb once to like my Hulu, and then it was like being used for a while. And I didn't know. And that's where Truebill comes into handy. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions that you don't need, want, or even forgot about. People on average save up to $720 a year with Truebill. And that's because companies make subscriptions really hard to cancel. It's like trying to unsubscribe from the emails that you just keep getting. That's like you trying to like cancel out of things. I don't know how many times I've been like, how do I cancel this? How do I end this? But Truebill takes all of that work out of it for me. You have a concierge that is there when you need them to cancel unwanted subscriptions so that you don't even have to deal with it. They helped me cancel some magazine subscriptions that I didn't even know that I had. I honestly just thought that I was just getting these magazines for free sent to my house. And I wasn't. I was being charged for them. And I remember I called and talked to this guy, and I was like, I didn't sign up for this. And he goes, yes, you did. And like hung up on me. This is a true story. And I'm like, oh, what? But Truebill actually took care of it for me. So that was pretty awesome. And that was $80 right there. They have over 2 million users and have helped save over $100 million. They have customers who have left them great reviews. Like in a matter of seconds, I saved $660 for the year on my DirecTV bill, saved $128 for the year on my Sirius XM bill, and saved $840 a year on car insurance. So don't fall for the subscription scams. Start canceling today at Truebill.com/mamas. Go right now to Truebill.com/mamas. It can save you thousands a year. That's Truebill.com/mamas. Now back to the episode. I'd love for you to talk about how, like, kind of jumpstarting your career and thinking outside of the box, because you, like your friends were saying, like you had a bunch of kids, like you're a busy person. So how were you able to do that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I recommend to busy moms, especially when you've got little ones and you're pregnant, I was fortunate, and I acknowledge this, that we were able to, my husband was bringing home most of the income. I will say it wasn't, we were not wealthy. We were living paycheck to paycheck. So it was not the case that was an easy thing. But, we kind of made it work, mainly because there was just so much going on. It was really, that would have been tough for me to launch like a 50-hour-a-week career. Not impossible. It just would have been very hard. And so I really took baby steps. You mentioned blogging. I started out with blogging, and I found that really worked, and it gave me energy. And so I would start just trying to take the little things that brought me joy to the next level. And so, for example, we found a way in the budget, we cut back on some other things so that I could get some babysitting help, so that I could do a little bit more blogging. And at the time, I felt so guilty. And I think this is such an important message for your listeners to hear, because again, we were living paycheck to paycheck. It was one of those seasons when I would log into my bank account and be like, I don't want to see that. Don't be red. Just don't be red. Things were really tight. And so setting aside budget to have a gal for $10 an hour come a few hours a week. I mean, it felt like, what is this, Downton Abbey? This, feels so luxurious. So then when she was there, just this teen from the neighborhood, I felt guilty. Like, well, I should be spending more quality time with the kids, or I should be cleaning, or it felt very self-indulgent to blog. My blog was making no money. I think I got a check one time for $1.86 on ads. And I thought, who am I to carve out this time for this blog that like nobody really cares about? I've got a couple dozen readers, like why am I doing this? Looking back, it was one of the best decisions I made in motherhood, because it allowed me to get on that path of connecting with my passions. And it was a blue flame. It gave me energy. But then, long story short, like the fact that I ended up with a daily national talk radio show on Sirius XM with a stand-up comedy tour, it all started with that blog. So the fact that I made space for that when I was in the season of having little kids, babies, toddlers, when those kids get older, a lot of times moms are kind of caught off guard by this. They say, right now my youngest is 8, which is like so crazy for me to think about. But so now I'm in this whole different era of motherhood where we don't homeschool anymore. My kids go to school. And so I have all this time, and I was really well set up to thrive in this new season because I made a little bit of space for my passions when I was in that phase of life where I had babies and toddlers. And so, it all started with a blog, and I wrote. The way I was able to get a book deal was because I had a blog, so the publisher liked that. They thought, okay, you can probably sell this book to your fans. The publicity surrounding that book that I wrote ended up, SiriusXM saw me, and they recruited me to come on their network. And then I actually quit that job right before the pandemic to do stand-up comedy touring. But it all started with just carving out 2 to 4 hours a week to just update my blog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even that, like, I feel like is just hard. Like, good for you. Like, hearing it, I'm like, man, I can do that. And I just have not. It's like so hard to force yourself.
It's a battle. Honestly, I had to read the motivational books. Like there's a classic book, The War of Art, about where this guy, he's a very tough talking guy. I think he was in the Marines or something, but he's like a boot camp instructor saying, hey, look, if you have a passion, if you have some gift that you were meant to share with the world, you are withholding blessings from other people if you don't do that. Like you have a duty to go be your wonderful, amazing self. So I really would have to kind of immerse myself in books like that so that I just didn't let the guilt and the distractions. I mean, that's the thing, is you're so busy and you're so tired. I was so tired. I had pretty tough pregnancies, and it's so easy to just be like, you know what, I think I'll take a nap, or at the time, like Instagram was the new thing then. Like, I think I'll just surf Instagram or whatever. It's truly a battle. Like, you're going to have to fight for it if you want to carve out that space in your life for the thing that you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. My husband and I, in November, I think, we did like a challenge of no screens after 7 p.m. So no scrolling on your phone, no watching TV, no anything. So like any work I had to do, anything he had to do had to be done by 7 p.m. And I just remember, like, before that, I'd be like, oh, I really want to read this book, but I don't have time. Oh, I want to do this thing, but I don't have time. And I was like, oh, wait, I do have time.
Yeah.
I'm just like sitting, like, it's the end of the day and you're exhausted. And so I just don't want to think. So I'm just like watching a show on Netflix, or I'm scrolling Instagram, or I'm, just kind of tuning out because you've made so many decisions that day as a mom and as a wife. And then you're just like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to think. I'm just checking out. But it is more fulfilling to use that time differently. I felt better. Like, we went to bed earlier. We were reading books in bed. Like, it just felt better. I'm like, oh, this is nourishing my soul. Whereas like Netflix and Instagram don't. Like,
Right. I know those are the worst feelings. This actually happened to me last night. I looked at the clock and it's like 1:00 in the morning. I do the thing where I rotate back and forth between TikTok and Instagram. And I was like, well, now I feel envious of this person who is like on vacation in Tahiti. And, this person, like I saw something that really depressed me, but now I'm kind of, my brain is wired because I've been looking at a bright screen and then I couldn't fall asleep. And it's so funny because I was just thinking last night, why do I do this to myself? Like now I'm going to have a headache, when I wake up. I mean, it's crazy, but it's so addictive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But I like what you said. Like you just kind of have to force yourself to do it. And if you have a passion, it is carving out that time and setting yourself up for when you have more free time. Like
yes,
once the kids go back to school or whatever it is, like your youngest is whatever. It's like, oh, like even my sister who homeschools now, like her kids are just more self-sufficient. So she has more time to herself. So they know what to do with their school. They have like some virtual classes from home and different things like that. So it's like, oh, I have time now. And I was just talking to her yesterday and she's like, I think I'm finally going to do like this course that she wanted to do, like, and follow some of her passions. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, but you have to like use that time. And it's so hard.
Yes. And I can't recommend strongly enough that women, even if it is 1 hour a week, just 1 hour a week, take the space to do that thing you're passionate about. And I know so many people will say like, well, I don't know what I'm passionate about. And one of the tips I always give is take something that you like to do that your friends have commented that they would hate to do. So with me, with writing, I remember in college one time it was spring break and I didn't have plans with my family. And so I just sat in my dorm room and wrote a novel for the entire, I didn't go outside. I don't think I saw the sun at all during spring break. And I felt self-indulgent. I was like, how could anyone have a life this luxurious and amazing? What an incredible life I am leading. And when my roommate got back from the beach, she was like, this is the saddest thing I've ever heard in my life. And that's when I realized that I had this very special passion for writing that my roommate and my friends were like, that's the worst thing we can imagine. Having to write, because they hated writing. They were like, having to write 50 pages during spring break. We'd rather die. And so, is there something in your life that other people, think of your sister, think of your best friend, that they would be like, oh, I would glad you like to do that because I hate to do that. That's probably one of those special passions that you should be carving out space for and fostering in your life.
Mm-hmm. I'd love for you to talk about, like you said, you quit your job at Sirius to go on tour right when the pandemic hit. What was that like?
Terrible. So my tour started, I self-produced a stand-up comedy tour. My best friend and I booked a national tour on my personal credit card. I would have gone bankrupt if we had not sold tickets to this thing. And we booked theaters. I mean, these weren't small venues. The biggest theater had 1,000 seats in it. And I'd never done anything like this. So I had fans from the radio, but I didn't know, were they going to show up? Like, I think I have people who listen to me on the radio. We're about to find out. And so we did that. That started fall of 2019. It went into spring. And that tour was going well enough. I mean, actually, all but 2 events sold out. I mean, it was a sellout tour. It was incredible. And so just financially and also just confirmation that there's something here, it was going well enough that, financially I was able to do that. Now, we knew COVID was starting, but this was March 2020 when I made the decision. So we were all kind of in that space of saying, well, this won't last that long. I'll be back on tour by fall 2020. And it was one of those things where I'm a big believer in just trusting your gut. And my gut told me that it was time to leave that job because it was a great job. I loved my coworkers. I went to New York City all the time. But being on the air live 2 hours a day, every day, your schedule is utterly inflexible. I mean, it was live. So from 1 to 3 p.m., I had to be on the air. So I could never make lunch plans with people. Travel was difficult. And I just felt in my bones that phase of life was ready. It was coming to an end for me. Mm-hmm. And oddly enough, even though it was a big financial hit to lose that income, but then not be able to tour until now, I'm finally back on tour after all that time. I still don't regret it because over and over again in life, I've found when you just trust what your gut is telling you, you will not regret it. And it might take 5 years for you to look back and see why that was the right decision, but you will look back and see that that was the right decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, March 2020 threw a curve for everyone, but it did introduce so much virtually, and other options. Like people got into other things. I'd love for you to talk about your podcast, because I know that that's something that you started up.
Yes. And so that was an easy transition for me, going from talking 10 hours a week to doing 1 hour a week. I thought, oh, this is cake. This is easy. And so it's called This Is Jen. When I started it, I intentionally chose kind of a generic name because I wasn't sure what direction I was going to take it. So I thought I need just a general name that whatever I throw at this thing, it can handle. I don't do guest interviews. I like to say that the actual tagline that is on iTunes says, this podcast is like if your life coach drunk dialed you after 3 mimosas. So it's like what I've learned, encouragement for women, but all with a light tone of like, look, guys, I know that we are all dumpster fires. So here's my best guess at how to solve this problem. But, to be honest, I probably won't solve it that well myself. And so it's me and my producer. I talk about life. I talk about crazy stories of what's going on with me. I like to think of it as, I like to imagine my fans running errands, out in their minivans, picking up their dry cleaning. And I'm like your smack talking friend who is sitting in the passenger seat and just riffing with you on stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you have tons of life experience. I mean, just even being a mom of 6, like you've been through stuff.
Yeah. Just building my own career from, going from blogging to this and having 6 kids. I really do have a passion for just helping moms who are in different phases and maybe who haven't yet been through what I've been through, just encouraging them. I think that's, at the end of the day, I always feel like the exact details of the advice don't really matter. I think that's one of the things I've learned, that, people can give you advice and it's really not the exact details that are going to help you, but just having an encouraging word from someone who can say, look, you are doing a better job than you think you are. If you're a mom, you're a better mother than you think you are. It's all going to work out. You just have to trust your gut, believe in yourself, and realize that things are going better than you think they are. A lot of times that's all people need to feel better.
Mm-hmm. Right. I feel like the trusting your gut is like a big thing. And that's something that I'm learning a lot with baby number 2 coming. Because with baby number 1, I feel like I definitely went down the Google hole a lot.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I have 12 nieces and nephews on my side and 5 on my husband's side. And I have 3 great nieces. Well, now 4. Another one was just born. So I'm trying to think. You have great nieces.
Yeah.
My oldest sister's 13 years older than me, and she had her first kid really young. And then, I have.
Okay, so one of your sister's kids has a kid. That's incredible.
Yeah.
What a beautiful family. I have to tell you, one of the reasons I'm so in awe of that, I am an only child. My husband is an only child, and my dad was an only child. So I have very few cousins. My husband has very few cousins, and my kids have no cousins. So and I'll never be an aunt. My husband will never be an uncle. So I just appreciate that, because some of us do not have that, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's awesome. And my sister started having kids when I was super young. I was 6 or 7 when my nephew was born. So I have been around kids my entire life, so I feel like I've seen a lot, and then you get advice from so many people, but for some reason when it's your own, you're like, yeah, but I'm going to go ahead and Google it, or I'm going to go ahead and do this thing. And I did so much of that with my daughter, of like taking like 3 different sleep courses and taking a bunch of different, like all these different things. And I'm like, this time I'm just really going to try to like get to know my baby and try to trust my gut and meet them where they're getting to know me. I'm getting to know them, and just not be like, Googling constantly. So that's like my plan to try for this one.
That is so right on. And I bet that makes a lot of your listeners feel better, because I bet a lot of your fans are in a situation where I am, where they did not grow up around kids. I mean, I had 0 experience. 0. I didn't even babysit. I mean, I knew nothing about babies. And, my husband's mom and my mom, they kind of didn't either because they only had one kid very long time ago. And, and me not having siblings and him not having siblings, my husband had never held a baby when our son was born. And so, of course, we were super tempted down the Google research path because we didn't know anything and we didn't know anyone who knew anything. And I bet a lot of your listeners are in similar positions. It makes me feel better that even someone who grew up around babies and kids, like that you feel that same insecurity sometimes too.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, it's totally different. But yeah, I mean, I do think that the intuition and the gut definitely comes in there. And I find it super interesting, since you guys both came from small families, that you chose to have a large one.
Yeah. That was, of course, I have happy memories of my childhood. No problem being an only child. A lot of my friends have only children. So obviously there is no one right family size.
Oh, for sure.
But just for us, it just felt right. And it wasn't actually a plan in the sense that when we got married, we did not say we want to have 6 babies in 8 years, but it was one of those things we just, take it one day at a time, and the babies just kept showing up. And, and the other thing when you have so many babies so quickly is it becomes routine. I mean, I spent a decade with 3 children in diapers at once, and it didn't feel hard after a point because I was so used to it. You optimize. My house was the most child-proof house on planet Earth. I mean, my house was so set up to be babyland that it was really not that big of a deal to bring another baby in. And another thing I learned is babies are so different in terms of their temperaments because, for example, my first 3 babies were in different ways, kind of, they had their difficult sides. So when I was pregnant with my 4th, I was actually really stressed out about it because my oldest, I think, would only be 4 when this one arrived. And there were so many sleepless nights thinking, I can't do this. My 4th baby, she was the easiest baby anyone has ever had. She slept through the night on her own with me doing nothing, starting at 6 weeks. She just slept and smiled. No kidding. I took her to the pediatrician when she was 5 months old because I said, what's wrong with this baby? She never cries. All she does is she sleeps and she smiles. And she's my 4th kid. I know my kids don't do this. They scream and they never sleep. So was she switched to the hospital? Like, what happened here? But then my 5th kid was the craziest, most high maintenance, difficult baby toddler. And I mean, it like all she did was scream and never sleep. So all that is to say, I'm glad that I remained, open to having more kids because I had some difficult babies and it was tempting to be like, well, I can't do this again. But then your next baby will be a totally different experience than the one before it.
I know. That's what they say. I'm so curious.
Very, very different baby personalities.
Yeah, I know. I'm curious what this baby's going to be like because my daughter, she was a super easygoing kid. Like she still is pretty easygoing, but just was never a great sleeper until she was like 13, 14 months. And then she just all of a sudden slept through the night. And I was like, this is the best thing ever. But before then, she would be 11 months old and, everyone always asks, how's the baby sleeping? And I'm like, mind your business, it like pisses me off because she's not sleeping.
100%. That was my life with number 1. He never slept. And I had to do like a sleep training thing with him when it was like 20 months old. He was almost 2 and he was still waking up every few hours around the clock. It was this epic endeavor, but I know that pain of like, please stop asking me how this baby is sleeping. I don't want to talk about it. It's ruining my life. I'm so tired. I don't remember what it's like not to feel tired. That was an ordeal.
I know. It's so hard. But I mean, you get through it. Right?
Yeah, you do. Yep.
You did it again and again. So you do. That's awesome though.
And you just learn, like my future children had the same, other than number 4, the other babies had that same tendency not to want to sleep. But I just learned little tricks and techniques that just made it a little easier. I never had another one that was as bad of a sleeper as he was, because I think I just learned more about babies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd love to touch on how to build kind of that support system. Because I remember listening, I don't remember if it was a podcast or something, listening to somebody and they're talking about how now they're kind of like, you can do it all, like as a mom, blah, blah, blah. But like, we weren't created that way. Like we were created in villages and community to help each other out, to come alongside each other. And now it's like, you know, get back to work, or you're doing it on your own, your spouse is at work or whatever. It's like the lack of support is huge. And it can be really hard to try to find your people.
Oh, 100%. That's actually a big part of my mission. And some of the stuff I've done on social media that has gone most viral is talking about that. Like, people can Google, if you Google Jen Fulwiler hair tutorial, I did I did actually give tips on how to do your hair, but I said it was a rant about how you should not feel guilty about using this time. You should let your kids watch Netflix because you don't have a village. And so that is like, I am super passionate about that topic because, women don't, I think we don't really realize how unnatural our lives are. So I studied historical anthropology in college for a while. And one of the things that really struck me, if you look at any time and place, any other than recent eras in human history, women raised children in villages. So a typical tribal village anywhere in the world in human history would have been like the women go together to go get the water together and wash clothes at the river. And so they're talking to each other. They're sharing information. Like, you know, my toddler is acting this way. Is this normal? Does he have a problem? So there's all this support. There's all this information flow. Then meanwhile, their kids are off playing together and the older kids are watching the younger kids. And, you know, women did not spend a lot of hands-on time other than with their babies. The village kind of took care of their kids who were kind of ages like 2 to 16. And so they had that support of the other women. And the other thing was a lot of the things, like, for example, being a mentor to your kids, being an example of what it means to be kind, what it means to be strong. You had that in the village context. You as a mother did not need to model every possible virtue for your kids. Like, maybe you are impatient, but your sister is a super patient person and she's around your kids all the time. And so that I always want to tell women, if it feels hard, it's not your fault. It's not because you're not trying hard enough. It's not because you're doing something wrong. You were not meant to do this alone. And so even if you can't do anything about it, you do not have a support system and you can't fix that, I think that it would give you a certain amount of relief to just realize that pressure that you feel is not because you're a screw up as a mom. You're doing your best in highly unnatural circumstances. And so we worked really hard to develop a support system. And we made a really big decision early on that we wouldn't move cities, and that this is not the right path for everyone. This is just what worked for us. And so we told our parents, if you will move here, because we're only children, so that was an option for us. We said, if you will move here to our city, I live in Austin, Texas. If you move here, we promise we won't move. Even if my husband gets an opportunity to make more money or whatever, we will stay in this city. And so sure enough, it took years, but first my mom moved, and then my mother-in-law moved, and then eventually my dad moved down here. And so at the height of our village, we had my mother-in-law living 10 blocks away, my mom living a mile away, and then my dad retired, and he would be our family chauffeur. He would take my kids to all of their activities, their sports, their practices, whatever. He would drive them around to everything. And then we also carved out a part of the budget. Again, it wasn't easy. We had to make sacrifices. But I'm a big believer that if you can, to have a village part of your budget where you give yourself the support system that you were designed to need and don't have, I really believe that should be categorized as a necessity, not as a luxury. And so we would make sacrifices. We would skip vacations or buy all generic brand at the store so that I could have anywhere between 5, 10, 15 hours of babysitting help each week. And so between the babysitting help and my mom and my mother-in-law and my dad, I had a tremendous support system. And again, I always say what we did is not, I'm not saying that's right for everyone. I know that's not an option for everyone, but whatever you can do in your own life to be intentional and make those kind of trade-offs to give yourself a support system, I cannot recommend strongly enough.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that you touched on that, because a lot of the things that you're saying, I mean, it is things that moms are telling themselves, like, basically, I need to be all things for all people. And we're not built like that. That's not what we're meant to do.
You're not meant to do that. That's a bar that no one was ever meant to hit.
But even like the guilt of like, okay, if I'm a stay-at-home mom with a couple of kids, why do I need a babysitter? You know what I mean? Like, why would I need 100%. Any help? That's my role. You know, like that's my job, not somebody else's job. So I think a lot of people listening, they're being told that. They're telling themselves that. They're being told that, you know, like, why do you need a babysitter? Like, you're the mom. You're a stay-at-home mom. Like, what do you need help for? And I'm just so glad that you're touching on it, because community isn't always there. Like, not everybody has family. And even when you have family help, like we do have family help. My husband, I moved to where he's from, and he's born and raised here. His entire family's here, and his mother-in-law helps out a lot. Like right now, my daughter, I dropped her off at my sister-in-law so I could come podcast. But sometimes schedules overlap. You know what I mean? Like, they're not everyone's always available either. But I'm just glad how you worded it and brought it up, that like, even if you're a stay-at-home mom, you are not meant to be all things to your children.
100%. And it's so funny you bring that up, because I was just doing some content on that. This idea that if you are a stay-at-home mom and not earning an income, you need help as much as anyone. And that it is such a misconception that you should be able to handle it all. As a mom staying home. No women have ever done this. Your ancestors did not do this. Even the women who, for example, my grandfather, he lived many, many years. And so through him, I got a glimpse of what life was like in a different era. He was born in the early 1900s with, whole different era. And he talked about how a lot of people lived rural back then. And he said, my mama never saw us. We would go out, we would be hunting, we would be down at the creek. And a lot of moms, this is probably familiar to some people, they had bells on the outside of the house. The reason they had the bell is because the kids were nowhere to be found. And the mother would ring the bell to let them know it was time to come in for dinner. This mom was in an empty house the vast majority of the time, because everything was rural and people perceived anyway that it was safer. Their kids were just never home. Even when I was a kid, the rule was always that we could roam all over the neighborhood, do whatever we wanted. We just had to be home whenever the street lights came on. Mm-hmm. And now you do that, CPS will show up at your door if you let your kids just go outside. And I think maybe there were some dangers that people just weren't aware of. I'm not sure that our parents should have done that in the 80s, but for whatever reason, we can't and don't do that anymore. And so having your children underfoot all day long, where you are expected to be everything to them and just do everything for them and be their entertainment and all that. This is the most unnatural thing in the world. And getting some help so that you can get a break, just like all of your female ancestors got a break, is not only not self-indulgent, this is something that you really, really, really need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. That I love that you took it back though too, because I feel like a lot of people think, there was villages, but you had to do everything, and it's like you had different roles. Like people had different roles, so it wasn't you doing everything for everyone in your family all the time.
Right. It's I remember one, I can't remember what region this was, but one tribe we studied in anthropology, some of the women would gather and they would make this was a people, they lived in like teepee type structures. And so some women kind of specialized in making those teepees, others specialized in making clothes, and then others would go out and like find clean water and bring it back. So I mean, they worked together. Their daily burdens were kind of divided up among the community. And again, I mean, and the other thing is, because elderly people were around. So you would have, let's say, your grandmother and your great aunt would be in your hut, and they could hold your baby. They could watch the babies and the little kids while you went and did something else. And yeah, I mean, this idea that it is in any way natural or normal for women to be stuck in a house with, and they're their kids' only source of entertainment. And also, like, what if you feel a little sick for a day? You have no backup. Your husband has to go to work, and just having to do everything that you do with no help when you are feeling terrible. You guys are heroes. This is insane. Nobody should be expected to live like this. And it's so important for moms to understand it. Even if you can't, let's say it's just impossible. You cannot get babysitting. You can't build your village support system. What you can do is give yourself a break and realize that what you're doing is really hard, and you're doing an amazing job given your very unnatural circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Do not feel guilty.
Yeah. Do not.
Because that mom
feel
guilt
guilty.
is real.
You are doing, if your great grandmother could see what you do in a day, she would be like, this is crazy. I mean, her life was harder. Like, obviously, hand washing clothes out over, on a washboard. I mean, in a way, our lives are more luxurious. We have washing machines. Our great grandmothers would be jealous of that, of the washing machines and the dishwashers. But I do think they'd be like, are you not going crazy? This is insane that you have to do all of it. Why aren't you letting the kids go outside for 6 hours at a time,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that you touched on that, because I do feel like it's a super important topic that I think everybody listening can relate to. So before we wrap up, I want you to tell us about your tour.
Yes. Okay. So this is, I'm doing a stand-up comedy tour. This one is, I did not book myself. I signed with a big fancy agency. And so that's a lot of fun. But by the way, there's a new pressure now. I used to have the financial pressure because I was booking it myself, but now I have the pressure of, I don't want to disappoint people. Now that I have these fancy agents, I'm like, well, are they happy with the cities we're going to? Are they happy with how it's turning out? So it's this whole new psychological battle that I have to face. So let me see if I can, okay, off the top of my head, I'm going to Topeka, Dallas, San Antonio, Fort Lauderdale, Atlanta, Orlando, Nashville. We just added Nashville, and there is definitely a city that I am forgetting, but that kind of gives you the idea. Boston, New York, and DC. Okay. I'm forgetting the whole East Coast stretch. So, and people probably wonder how I work that with my family. So I choose to do kind of all the cities together. So I'm gone a lot for 6 weeks, and then I'll take like 2 months off, and I'm just home, and I can catch up on the absolute disaster that my house has become. The other thing is, now that my kids are older, I take them to some of my tour stops. So you guys might meet some of my kids at the tour stops, and people can get tickets at jfcomedytour.com. And one of the things, I keep my comedy fairly clean. It's like PG-13, because per this village idea, women are so lonely, and they, it's so hard to find a reason to go out with your girlfriends, because it always sounds like a good idea, but then it's like, I don't know, next week. And really, one of the things that inspired my first tour, and that still inspires me to touring, is I want to give women an excuse to have a night out. Go out to dinner with your girlfriends, come to my show. And that's one of the reasons I keep my comedy pretty clean, so that you can invite anyone. You can invite your friend from church, and you can also invite your friend with tattoos on her face. Like, whoever you're friends with, they will be welcome at my show. I don't do politics and like controversial stuff, because I want it to be a fun night out where, you're not feeling awkward because like you invited someone and now I said something, that's really upsetting to them. Like, it's not that kind of comedy. So it's just talking about life and how crazy life is. Lots of stories of how much I feel like I'm failing. And when I can't do this at every show, but when I can, I just hang out in the lobby and just meet people and say hello. And I really try to get to know the people who show up. Sometimes I'm not able to, just logistically, but when I can, I always do that. And so even if people this is the first time they're hearing from me, my fans are the nicest human beings on planet Earth. It is a very nice group of people. So you are more than welcome to come join us, even if you've just heard of me for the first time today.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm excited to see more sketches. I, unfortunately, am like going to be having the baby and like brand new at that time. So,
what region of the country are you in?
Chicago.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, actually, I'll have to plan. I am definitely, the biggest show I ever did where I filmed my special was Chicago area. It was in St. Charles.
Yeah, that's right by me.
Oh, okay. So I was at the Arcada Theater in St. Charles. So my comedy special, by the way, my comedy special is free on YouTube. It's called The Naughty Corner. You will definitely want to search Jen Naughty Corner. Don't just type Naughty Corner into YouTube. I do not recommend that. People were searching for it on Amazon and they were like, oh, wow. Yeah. Some really interesting products here. But I filmed that in St. Charles, Illinois. And I was just talking to my manager yesterday. I was like, I've got to get back to Chicago. We're doing that in the fall for sure. So I will for sure put you on the VIP list. You can hang out backstage and you can bring your baby.
Oh, how fun. Yeah, no, I would love to. Yeah, St. Charles we're out in the burbs too, and it's really close here. So yeah, that's awesome. Well, cool. Well, I'm really excited for you. For those listening, I'm going to have all of the links up. So I'll have the YouTube to the Naughty Corner. I will have where you can get the tickets at with the jfcomedytour.com and a link to your podcast and all of that as well. So thank you so much, Jen, for coming on the podcast today, for sharing everything. I feel like the conversation... I'm interviewing a comedian today, but we talked like deeper topics that are much needed, especially to all the mamas listening. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and time and expertise with us.
Well, thank you. This has been such a pleasure. You've given me all sorts of stuff to think about these are topics that I'm super, super passionate about. So, and I can't wait to listen to more of your podcast. I've started listening to some of your older episodes and I'm catching up. So I can't wait. This is a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, make sure that you check out her comedy tour. I'm leaving the link in the notes. I had so much fun chatting with her. She is definitely an inspiration. Whenever I just see moms going for their dreams and their goals, I'm like, okay, I can do it too. You just kind of get that little boost that you need because momming is hard. Trying to raise kids and take care of a family and, if you have a job doing that too, it's so much and it's really hard to really make time for what, not only like your goals and your dreams, but like what fills your cup. Is there it's cool that they were able to get a nanny like once a week for a couple hours so she had time to herself to start even being like, what do I want to do? Like, where does my inspiration come from? So it's definitely inspiring. And also not everyone can like afford a nanny. So even just like getting creative and finding ways to take some time for yourself and make sure that your cup is full, whether that's getting community or having family or friends help, or your spouse watching the kids, every other Saturday for a couple hours so you can just go sit in a coffee shop by yourself and be like, all right, this is nice and quiet and get your cup full a little bit. So it was really great talking to her. Like I said, her tour, you can get tickets for it in the show notes. So make sure that you check that out. All right. We will talk to you next week. Love you guys. Bye.
If you want to be the most interesting person at the cocktail party, well, hop on over and listen to the Brain Candy podcast.
Our award-winning content will have you laughing while you're learning.
We read all the best articles, books, and studies and keep up with new TV shows, documentaries, and pop culture. And then we cram it all into 2 shows a week.
Conspiracy theories, cannibal rabbits, unsolved mysteries, the history of the Walkman. There's something for everyone.
The Brain Candy podcast. Find our link in the show notes.
Or simply search for the Brain Candy podcast on your podcast app.